I'm meteorologist Peter Chan at the National Weather Service, and welcome to the Alaska Weather Show on this Saturday, July 30th, 2022. And we do this each evening. We bring you this broadcast through a unique partnership with Alaska Public Media. We're going to jump right into things because I have a shorter public weather segment this evening. West-southwest flow aloft will continue into next week. This keeps the low pressure systems rolling around about every 2-3 days. So temperatures are going to remain somewhat cooler, but not drastically cold, and occasionally wet pattern at times. It looks like this will hold into early August, cooler in the west and a little wetter in through the eastern areas, especially of the mainland. But there is a possibility another pretty big warm ridge of high pressure could rebuild over the Bering as we get toward mid-August, and that could allow warmer, drier conditions to settle in, especially on the west side of the state. So we'll see if that actually unfolds, but something to consider here once we get by the first week or two there of August. Looking at the cloud cover, low clouds Barrow, their low temperature this morning, 32, was the coldest in the state, along with the Barter Islands. 34 this afternoon, and then Nenana, notice some cloud cover spilling over the Alaska range, could lead to a few scattered showers as we head into Sunday. Temperatures there in the early mid-afternoon, upper 60s to near 70 degrees. Anchorage picked up 0.16 of an inch of rainfall at Ted Stevens Airport, which pushes it now to 4.25 inches for July the 5th. Wettest July on record for Ted Stevens Airport, and so far Merrill Field and Lake Hood airports have had the wettest Julys on record. Valdez getting some light rain and fog, 55 degrees. Fire weather, cooler temperatures, areas of rain, south central, Copper River Basin Panhandle, so that really puts a damper on the fire danger, which is good news. Winds generally light in most areas. Coming up, we could see some scattered showers, a few isolated storms in the interior as we head through the next several days. But nothing too terribly exciting. At least the fire danger has come down quite a bit across southern parts of the state, now low. Still a few areas of high to very high up there, the lower Tanana and Yukon Flats areas there in the central, east central interior. Satellite imagery shows that moisture pushing northward across the Alaska range into portions of the interior. Also enhanced clouds over the northern Gulf. Could even get a flash or two of lightning out of that as it works its way northeastward. And then back toward the Aleutian chain, we have another low that's going to be lifting northeastward across the western and central Aleutians tonight, and that's going to bring gale force winds to the central and portions of the eastern Aleutians, especially later tonight and during the day on Sunday. So we have one double barrel low, one there in the lower Kuskokwim Delta, the other one there between the Kenai and Kodiak Island in the western Gulf. That occluded front will weaken as it approaches the Panhandle, but those of you in the Panhandle, keep in mind you're going to see some additional showers, and there could also be, once again, areas of low cloudiness and denser fog redeveloped for tonight. Pretty typical summertime rainforest weather there for the southeast Panhandle. That low crossing in through the central Aleutians later tonight, and then on Sunday pushing back out into the Bering, with an occluded front riding up the Alaska range with a band of showers, maybe even a rumble of thunder there on the North Pacific side of the Alaska Peninsula. And then finally, as we get up into Monday afternoon, that low will continue to press eastward up through the northwestern Gulf with a frontal system out there through the central Gulf and the low North Pacific interface with yet another system in a same position there, south and west of the Aleutians, poised to take a similar track. Now let's look at low temperatures Sunday morning. Lows will generally be in the 50s in the Panhandle and across much of south central with the cloud cover and some areas of light rain or showers still lingering, and relatively mild there north of the Alaska range as you ride up through the Yukon Valley. Further north, temperatures will get down into the mid-30s or so there along the Arctic coast. Temperatures Sunday afternoon will generally be low mid-60s there in the Panhandle. Also, again, generally temperatures, with the exception of the Gulf Coast, south central interior, should see readings back up into the 60s everywhere. If you can get some sunshine, could squeak out a 70-degree reading perhaps there near Gulkana or Talkeetna, as well as up in east central areas along the Elkan border at Eagle and Fort Yukon. Otherwise, coolest temperatures remain in the lower 40s there along the Arctic coast and only around 50 in the far west there of the Seward Peninsula. Monday morning lows similarly low mid-50s Panhandle, lower 50s South Central, and around or a bit above 50 across much of the interior, with generally 40s and 30s once you get north there of the Brooks Range. Extending out through the Aleutian chain, temperatures, of course, are fairly uniform, mid-upper 40s, given the proximity of the waters. And then on Monday afternoon, we're still anticipating temperatures to generally be lower mid-60s in the Panhandle, maybe only lower 60s, around 60-ish in Anchorage. As again, there'll be some other cloud cover and some showers trying to move through the areas. Further north, if you can get a smidgen of sunshine, it could be around 70 again at places like Fairbanks up through Fort Yukon, and Eagle could maybe even manage the lower 70s. Coolest readings, highs only near or a bit above 40 there along the Arctic coast, especially east of Utqiagvik through Dead Horse on over toward Kaktovik. And then readings generally in the 50s through the Seward Peninsula. And as we round down through the Alaska Peninsula, we do anticipate temperatures there to generally be mid-upper 50s for highs as we go through Monday afternoon. And let's take a look at the 6 to 10 day temperature outlook for August 5th through the 9th. And we see below normal temperatures centered on the interior southwest, just west-northwest of the Alaska Range, and kind of there around the upper Kuskokwim, middle Yukon valleys. And overall, the entire state will see temperatures average a bit below normal. Nothing terribly cold, but certainly not as warm as we have been. And the potential exists for above normal precipitation, especially across central, east central, and northeastern areas around Fairbanks. Eagle, Arctic Village could see precipitation average a bit above normal, but there are indications that a warmer ridge of high pressure could build by mid-month over the Bering Sea, which could push warmer and drier conditions back into the west side of the state. So we'll have to wait and see if that actually does develop.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Well, it's now time for your aviation weather if you have a flight planned on Sunday or on Monday. We have weakening area of low pressure on Sunday morning that'll be in the northeastern Gulf as it lifts northeastward up into southern portions of the Yukon and northern Panhandle. A better low will be located back out toward the Bering Sea, impacting the Aleutians, especially central into the eastern Aleutians, with some gale force winds. Otherwise, rather widespread MVFR conditions across the southern half of the mainland and much of the Panhandle. Could even be an isolated rumble of thunder there, perhaps in the vicinity near Sitka. Far north, IFR conditions continue along the Arctic coast. Same thing Sunday afternoon, IFR along the Arctic and northwest coast. Area of IFR conditions, especially from around St. Matthew, Nunavik Island to near and just north of St. Paul. And there could be a rumble of thunder along an occluded front associated with that low as the front works its way northeastward up through the Alaska Peninsula, especially areas there on the North Pacific side. And for Monday morning, IFR conditions continue along the Arctic coast portions of the eastern North Slope. And then rather widespread IFR conditions along the southwest coast, especially the YK deltas extending into portions of the southwest interior. And for Monday afternoon, the frontal boundary will continue to press eastward across the Gulf, and with it a band of IFR conditions that extends from around Yakutat back through Prince William Sound, the Kenai, Cook Inlet, and then into the interior southwest back toward the lower Yukon basin. So past conditions on Sunday, generally MVFR conditions will hold at Anatuvik as well as Adigan passes. As we go further south and west, Lake Clark and Merrill will generally see MVFR conditions throughout Sunday. And as we ride up along the Alaska Range, Rainy Pass, MVFR. Could see IFR conditions Sunday morning, especially south side of Windy Pass and as you go down through the Matsu Valley, giving way to MVFR conditions by afternoon. Isabel Pass, generally MVFR conditions on Sunday, but could see VFR conditions turn about there in through portions of the Copper River Basin. Same thing at Matasta Pass, MVFR conditions giving way to VFR conditions. And then finally, further south and west, Tanita Pass, IFR conditions Sunday morning giving way to MVFR conditions. And Portage Pass should see generally IFR conditions along the length of that pass Sunday morning giving way to MVFR conditions Sunday afternoon. And in the northern panhandle, Chilkoot and White will see generally MVFR conditions prevail throughout Sunday. Freezing levels are highest way out southeast there, down through the North Pacific, south of the Gulf of Alaska and across Haida Gwaii, 14,000 feet or so. As we go along areas of the northern Gulf, freezing level comes down to 10,000 feet until you get into the interior. Along the Alaska Range up toward the Brooks Range at 8,000 feet, and then finally 6,000 foot freezing levels aloft there along the northwest coast. Best chance for some icing Sunday will be up portions of the Panhandle and especially up through northwest Canada, parts of British Columbia, and southern Yukon, 12,000 to a flight level of 20,000 feet. Also could be some isolated moderate icing in some of the showers and perhaps even isolated thunderstorms that may pop up along and north of the Alaska Range between there and the Yukon River. And then finally, way to the west between 12,000 and a flight level of 20,000 feet with that low working its way through the lower Bering. And then finally, the far western Bering between 6,000 and 16,000 feet. Jet stream level winds are strongest there, 30,000 feet. We have 135 knot jet core working its way across the eastern Aleutians into the tip of the Alaska Peninsula, associated with that low that's going to be producing some gale force winds at the surface. Broad area of 40 to 65 knot winds, eastern Aleutians into the North Pacific at 9,000 feet or 700 millibars associated with that low. And then as we bring it down to 3,000 feet, we see that low pressure circulation near and just west of St. Paul, and area of 35 to upwards to 55 knot winds there across especially the central and into the eastern Aleutians. Low pressure out there north Panhandle, northeastern Gulf in the process of weakening. And that's going to translate to the best threat for any considerable moderate turbulence being across the central and eastern Aleutians on Sunday, generally between the surface and 4,000 feet. So that wraps up your flying weather. If you are thinking of heading out, check the latest forecast and observations, and have a safe flight if you do so.
We can't just put the fires out because we can't put them out. We've tried that now for a century, and it doesn't work. It just makes the next one worse.
You may see a place like this and think, total devastation. And it's not your fault for thinking that.
But that depiction is, as we've learned from countless experts over the last 2 weeks, not the whole story, and not how you should think about wildfires.
The truth is, there are lots of types of habitats out west, and fire affects them all in unique ways. So it's important to start thinking about the big picture with wildland fires. So let's first rewind. To help us understand what's going on out west, Rob and I started calling up the experts, and what we found was that the story of fire, particularly in the west, is complex. So to understand it, we planned a road trip.
Road trip time!
The goal of our road trip was to see as many forests as we could and meet experts around the region to help us understand the role fire plays out here. First destination was to find the forest burned by the now famous Great Fires of 1910. And at the heart of what is known as the Big Blow-Up, the logical first place to stop, the city of Wallace.
Hi there.
Hi. Good. Haley and I are in this cute town of Wallace, Idaho, which was completely destroyed by the 1910 fires. You can see how much damage this fire actually did. Let's send up the drone and see what the surroundings look like now. What we found was a small town surrounded by a dense forest, with every single tree just over 100 years old.
So everything we see behind us now, that's all new growth since 1910.
And to help us put these historic fires and the forests around Wallace in perspective, we met up with historian Diane Smith.
This is Wallace, and here are your fires.
All of this is the 1910 fires?
This is not that unusual. The fact is, it just was at a time in our development as a country. We noticed it, we paid attention to it, and we got the national attention for it.
Right. As it turns out, these fires helped reinforce the idea at the time that every fire needed to be suppressed at all costs. And this suppression for so long has led to new problems, namely thick forests full of fuel. But don't just take my word for it. Let me show you the difference.
Notice how different this place is than this one that has been thinned out quite heavily in the past, or like an area like this that's been burnt quite frequently.
In fact, both of these areas show how many forests would have looked in the past under regular burns. The dead and low-growing material gets consumed easily by fire, very much unlike this forest, which has had fire suppression for over 100 years and could lead to a high-intensity fire.
And all of this dry, dead material, that's problematic.
So we went looking for a big fire and just followed the smoke. Oh gosh, a huge crown fire. I gotta get this. These high-intensity fires aren't great because in many forests they kill all the trees over a large area, even in forests that used to be very resistant to frequent fires. And nobody knows that better than the people that work in this particular forest.
There's green coming back, and I guess I've gotten somewhat used to it, and I still have hope that the entire Sierra Nevadas won't look like this, that we can maybe get ahead of it. So the fires nowadays can move from the surface right into the tree canopies really easily, where in the past, fires would have kept trees pruned, they would have kept fuel densities low, and so now you end up with a lot more high severity fires in the West than had a fire regime kept under its historic recurrence. This to me is more a lesson of fire exclusion and keeping fire out of the system. If we're keeping it out of when it would burn with a beneficial effect, it will burn, and the probability of it burning at an unbeneficial state is higher.
So again, this is where it's complicated. We thought if only we could stop the fires, we'd win the fight. But the fires like the King Fire here show that stopping the fires only made it worse. Add that to the fact that we're living closer than ever to these wild lands. So to help us understand the wildland-urban interface, we met up with CAL FIRE. And as we were pulling up to this neighborhood, one of the residents quickly came out to tell us about the latest fire.
Yeah, our biggest fear is fire. It was very scary. I mean, everybody was honking and get out, and you know, there's a fire.
This is the risk across California. The response piece alone isn't going to solve this challenge if the homeowners aren't organized.
Because we're all in the same boat. We're one match away from everybody losing everything. It's a real fear.
Literally, we could have that fire spread up in here within a matter of seconds.
Wow.
California is going to have fires. We're not going to stop all the fires in California, so we have to have an infrastructure that's fire resistant. We need to work on policies that help us engage in active management of our forest. That's using prescribed fire as a tool. It's all the things in the toolbox. It's a combination of managing our forest and a combination of protecting our communities that are in it.
If it wasn't complicated enough, this made it very clear that you can't just let the fires burn whenever they start. The forests need to be managed to help mitigate the risk to us. But using fire seems to be one of the keys to making things safer, and knowing the science behind fire is always key to implementing good management.
Fire Sciences Lab, right over here.
So we made a stop at the Missoula Fire Lab to try to understand what we know about fire.
You see the flames at the very top and how they're sticking to the slope?
They really are. Everybody's laying down.
They're laying down. Well, that's flame attachment. Actually a very difficult thing to understand.
Here at the Fire Lab, the scientists study the basics of fire. Understanding the complexities here helps firefighters and forest managers in the field better predict and fight wildland fires.
Fires are inevitable. The only choices that we really have is what kind of fire to have and when do we want it. And that's it. Almost? Ready. You're ready. Jason's ready.
Mark's team is prepping to light a huge bed of precisely cut cardboard.
You're not going to be in any danger. So when the lights go out, don't move. Gasoline.
This is one of many experiments they'll run to understand the physics of fire, how it moves, how it spreads, and all of this measured by precise scientific instruments and high-speed cameras. tens of thousands of pieces of cardboard up in flames in mere seconds. The ongoing research will help us better understand fire with the ultimate goal that we can live better with it. But can we do that? There is one forest we knew of that seems to have figured out this coexistence with fire, a place where fires burn all summer, every summer. It's part of their way of life and a mentality we wanted to know about. And here we went out with our guides Frank Lake and Steve Valentine, who work with the local U.S. Forest Service and tribe to help keep a healthy forest.
This is perfect. The fire's basically come through and cleared out the understory, and all that's left are the trees.
Yeah, it's black and it's charred, and you just see a few of the earliest sprouts, but you come back in here a year, it's gonna be alive again.
And to many, this may seem destroyed, but they view it differently here.
That fire's medicine, because it's not if it comes, it's when it comes. We need fire, and fire needs us.
You see, fire needs people to remind us how important fire is to the ecosystem. Frank and Steve's ancestors have been burning this forest for millennia. It's now part of what makes the forest special. They just want to make sure that it's not forgotten.
Basically, what you leave behind is what's important.
When they say this is your foods and your medicines, your sacred places, your springs, your water, that's essential, that's who we are as people. We have to learn to live with fire. We have to learn to respect fire. We have to maintain that security. That's why I do what I do.
Haley and I have learned a lot on our journey. We've learned that fire is complicated, and it's not as black and white as we make it out to be, and it is an integral part of our forests. They've had fire running through them for thousands of years, and they will continue to have fire in them in the future. And we can't always put the fires out. We have to decide what kind of fires to live with, and that is why we need to work with these fire crews from around the country. We also need a public who understands the importance of fire on the landscape. A healthy forest, you see, is a forest that lives with fire.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Well, it's time to close out the show with the marine weather segment, looking at the sea ice edge. We still have ice lingering up there along the Arctic coast, especially just north of Prudhoe Bay. And it'll just be that gradual melt-off that occurs through the mid and late summer. As we go west, a lot of open water there through the Chukchi Sea and then the ice that's along the Russian coast. But as I mentioned, we'll just continue to see the slow melting going on up there across the far northern waters of the Beaufort Sea. For the Panhandle on Sunday, winds will be northwesterly 10 knots, Metlakatla, Ketchikan with 2-foot waves. As you go up the middle and upper channels, south winds 10 knots, waves a foot or two all the way up there through Lynn Canal. Outer Gulf, look for west-southwest winds around 15 knots, south of Gustavus through Craig, waves 5 feet. Winds a little more of a mixed bag off of Yakutat, onshore, offshore 10 knots, 4 5-foot waves. For Monday, northwest winds 15 knots, Ketchikan, Metlakatla with waves 2-3 feet. And then waves anywhere from 2 to as high as 4 feet in Lynn Canal as a result of south winds, anywhere from 10 to as high as 20 knots. And then the outer Gulf Coast, winds will be out of the west-northwest 10 to 15 knots, waves generally around 6 to as high as 7 feet south of Sitka and off of Craig. For the northwestern Gulf, first starting Prince William Sound, variable winds 10 knots, waves a couple of feet. Going up the length of Cook Inlet, winds generally 10 to 15 knots from the south-southwest, waves 2 to 3 feet, and winds west-southwest off of the Kenai at 15 to 20 knots with waves of 4 to 5 feet. On Monday, winds turn a bit northeasterly there in Prince William Sound, 10 knots, waves a couple of feet. North winds off of Seward there, 15 knots, waves maybe 5-6 feet offshore. Cook Inlet, winds will generally be out of the west-southwest around 10 knots, middle and upper Cook Inlet, but the entrance, look for westerly winds of 25 knots and waves 7 to 8 feet extending out there northeast of Kodiak. On Sunday, Kodiak Island will see southwesterly winds around 20 knots, waves 4 feet, Shelikof Strait, 6-7 feet in the North Pacific side. Winds will pick up out of the southeast down toward north of Cold Bay with waves running as high as 4 feet. And by Monday, another frontal system pushing its way through, so winds will tend to go west to southwest, 25 to 30 knots, waves 10 to 11 feet on the North Pacific side. and anywhere from 6-7 feet outside of Bristol Bay to as much as 11 feet there north of Cold Bay. And across the Aleutian chain, we have a low center that'll be passing north of there on Sunday afternoon, and winds will turn southwesterly as high as 35 to 40 knot gales. Strongest winds, highest waves 13 to 17 feet on the south side of the central Aleutians, especially south of Atka. And then on Monday, those winds do come down, still holding up southwesterly 30 knots in the far eastern Aleutians around Dutch Harbor, turning back more toward the south as you get into the central Aleutians, 15 to 20 knots, and then kind of mix back toward southeast and then northeasterly rather, around 20 knots over the western Aleutians. Off the southwest coast, winds will initially be southeasterly 15 to 20 knots from Nunavik Island down through St. Paul and St. George, waves 3 to 4 feet. Light easterly flow 5 knots out of Norton Sound with waves only around a foot. On Monday, winds will turn southwesterly 25 knots from St. Paul, St. George on up through the lower Kuskokwim Delta there, with waves offshore in the open waters as high as 8 to 10 feet. Look for north winds down there along Norton Sound and south of St. Lawrence Island, waves generally 2 to 3 feet there. And then along the Arctic coast, winds will be out of the east-northeast around 10 knots, waves a couple of feet. Those northeast winds will turn more northerly once we get into the lower Chukchi Sea and the Bering Strait at 15 to 20 knots, waves lower Chukchi Sea through the Bering Strait around 3 feet. And then on Monday, look for northeast-east winds around 10 knots along the Arctic coast, waves running a couple of feet. And then as we go down through the lower Chukchi Sea off of Cape Lisburne, northeast winds try to turn northwesterly into Kotzebue Sound, waves a couple of feet there. And then more northerly winds coming through the Bering Strait, 10 to 15 knots, and waves a few feet on the north side of St. Lawrence Island. A quick check, Sunday afternoon's weather map shows that low down around 1,000 millibars out there through the lower Bering north of the Aleutians, with an occluded front working its way across the Alaska Peninsula. That system will eventually emerge to the northwestern Gulf by Monday and begin to weaken, and we'll continue to see threat of scattered showers extend up into the interior along the Yukon River. Thank you for watching tonight.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.